The average 45-year-old in America has $115,000 saved for retirement. The average 45-year-old also needs somewhere between $1.3 and $1.8 million to retire without a lifestyle collapse at 65. That's not a gap, that's a canyon with a river at the bottom. And here's the part the finance industry genuinely does not want to say out loud. There are two hidden windows inside this problem, one in the tax code, one in the compound curve, that close permanently before most people even realize they existed. Miss both of them and the math stops being math and starts being triage. Most retirement content will tell you it's never too late, which is technically true, the way it's technically true that you can still catch a flight after the gate closes. The question is, what's it going to cost you? And the actual answer to that question in real dollar amounts, with the real mechanisms explained, will either make you move immediately or confirm every suspicion you've had about financial advice being specifically engineered to sound reassuring without being useful. Here's what this video is actually about. Not motivation, not you can do it. I'm going to show you the specific mechanical reasons why 45 is a pivot year in wealth building. Reasons that live in IRS publications, actuarial tables, and compound interest spreadsheets, rather than in LinkedIn posts from people who made their money selling courses about making money. I'm going to show you the compounding cliff, the Roth conversion window, the sequence of returns trap, and a Social Security timing calculation that almost everyone in this age bracket gets completely backwards. And by the end, you'll have a specific framework, not vibes, a framework for what to actually do with the 20-year window that is still open right now. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most of the ones online are mathematically wrong. They assume constant annual returns, they ignore sequence risk entirely, and they consistently make your plan look rosier than it is. Mine uses the actual methodology behind BlackRock and Vanguard's own planning models, and it'll show you the specific weak points in your current plan in about 3 minutes. The link is in the description. I only ask for your email to send you the report. I'm not storing your financial data. Now let me tell you about launch windows. In 1972, NASA launched Pioneer 10, the first spacecraft ever designed to travel beyond the asteroid belt toward Jupiter. The launch date wasn't chosen for convenience. It was determined by a specific alignment of Earth, the Sun, and Jupiter that would allow Pioneer 10 to use Jupiter's gravitational field as a slingshot, dramatically reducing the fuel required to reach outer orbit. Miss the window by a few weeks, and the fuel cost roughly doubles. Miss it by a few months, and the entire mission architecture has to change. The rocket does not care about your readiness. The physics works during the alignment, and it doesn't after. Your wealth-building life has the exact same structure. There are Windows-specific periods where the compounding math, the tax code, your earning power, and your time horizon all point in the same direction simultaneously. And the window that exists roughly between 45 and 62 is not one window among many. For most people in their 40s, it is the last window where compounding can still do the majority of the heavy lifting. After this window, you are providing all the fuel yourself. The trajectory is still achievable, but the cost per mile goes up steeply. I'm going to use this launch window metaphor 3 more times in this video because it explains not one, but 3 completely different problems. And the third problem is the one that will actually surprise you. But right now, let me show you the compounding cliff, because you think the problem is that you haven't saved enough yet. That's only half true. The bigger problem is structural. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a tax mechanism that your financial advisor almost certainly hasn't explained to you, not because they're incompetent, but because explaining it well requires admitting that 20 years of generic advice may have been optimized for simplicity rather than your actual outcome. But first, let's talk about what the math of late compounding actually looks like. Take 2 people, call them Marcus and David. Marcus begins putting $2,000 per month into a diversified index fund at age 35. The fund returns 7% annually. David does the exact same thing, same fund, same $2,000 per month, same discipline, starting at age 45, both retire at 65. Marcus ends up with approximately $2.4 million. David ends up with approximately $1.04 million. Same savings rate, same fund, same return, a difference of $1.36 million. And that gap was not created by David making bad decisions. It was created by 1 decade of early compounding that David never experienced. Because in the first 10 years, Marcus's money began generating its own money. By the time Marcus hits year 20, his portfolio is growing at the equivalent of $4,000 to $5,000 per month in organic gains. Money generating money at a rate that actually exceeds his monthly contribution. David never gets that phase. David arrives to the game in the fourth quarter, puts in the same effort as everyone else, and the scoreboard looks completely different. This is the compounding inflection point. It's not abstract. It's a line on a graph that bends sharply around the 25 to 30 year mark. And if you're starting your serious wealth building at year 20, you are on the wrong side of that bend before you make your first contribution. Now let's add the actual demographic layer. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finance is published every 3 years. Last full data from 2022 shows that the median retirement savings for Americans aged 45 to 54 is $115,000. Not $250,000, not even close, $115,000. The mean is $313,000, pulled up by a relatively small number of very high savers at the top, but median is the real story. Half of all Americans in what should be peak savings years have less than $115,000 in their accounts. So David doesn't arrive at 45 with a clean slate. He arrives with roughly $100,000 already saved, which sounds like progress until you do the compounding forward. At 7%, $100,000 doubles approximately every 10.5 years. By 65, that $100,000 becomes roughly $400,000 on its own without a single additional contribution. But he still needs another $650,000 in new contributions over 20 years to land at the low end of a comfortable retirement. At 7%, that requires roughly $2,700 per month in new savings every month for 20 years. Without interruption, that's the math of starting late. The fuel cost per mile is higher, the margin for error, 1 job loss, 1 medical event, 1 year where contributions stopped is nearly 0. And the psychological pressure of knowing you're behind tends to produce exactly the behavioral mistakes that make being behind worse, which is the piece that matters as much as any spreadsheet. Here's the thing about financial anxiety in your late 40s. There's a very specific psychological trap that almost every late starter falls into. Behavioral economists call it the catch-up fallacy, and it goes like this. I'm behind, therefore I need higher returns, therefore I need higher risk. This logic sounds rational. It is how people turn a difficult but recoverable situation into an unrecoverable one. The investor who loads up on speculative assets at 47 because he's trying to make up ground is not being bold, he's reacting. And reaction-based portfolio decisions in the accumulation phase have a well-documented record of destroying wealth rather than building it. I'll come back to this when I get to sequence of returns risk, because that's where this trap gets its teeth. But before I do, let me tell you about the financial advisor my friend Marco went to see in 2017. Marco was 49, had about $200,000 in a traditional 401k, and knew he was behind. The advisor ran a projection, showed him he needed to save more, and recommended I'm being completely serious, rolling $300 a month into a whole life insurance product with a cash value component. The pitch was guaranteed growth and a death benefit. Marco, who trusted this person, did it for 2 years. That's $7,200 that went into something with a surrender charge, returning about 3% annually, while the S&P 500 returned roughly 28% in 2019 alone. The advisor's fee on the insurance product was somewhere around 5% commission. Whole life insurance as a retirement catch-up tool, like putting a seatbelt on a bicycle because you're worried about car accidents. Now, let me talk about the thing your advisor isn't telling you about, the Roth conversion window. This is the best kept non-secret in personal finance. It's in every tax publication, every retirement planning textbook, and it is almost never proactively explained to people in their late 40s and early 50s. Here's why it matters. If you've spent your career contributing to a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, every dollar in those accounts is pre-tax. You've been getting a deduction every year going in, and the government has been quietly accumulating a claim against everything in there. Every dollar that comes out in retirement gets taxed as ordinary income in the year of withdrawal, which feels fine because you assume your income will be lower in retirement than it was while working. And for many people, that assumption holds, until it doesn't. At age 73, the IRS mandates required minimum distributions RMDs. You must withdraw a specific percentage of your account each year, whether you want the money or not. The percentage is based on your account balance and your life expectancy, calculated by the IRS. On a $750,000 traditional IRA at age 73, you're looking at roughly $28,000 in mandatory withdrawal. That's taxable income whether you needed it or not. Now add Social Security, which becomes up to 85% taxable once your combined income exceeds $34,000 for a single filer. Add any pension. Add any taxable dividend income from a brokerage account. And suddenly, a retiree at 73 who thought they'd be in the 15 or 22% bracket finds themselves consistently in the 24 or even 32% bracket in retirement, paying more in taxes than they expected, at an age where they have essentially no flexibility to change their income structure. This is not an obscure edge case. This is the documented experience of millions of people who followed conventional 401k advice for 30 years and arrived at 73 to discover that the deferred tax liability was larger than they'd modeled. By the way, hit subscribe if this is adding something real. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may genuinely stop showing you my videos. I'm not being theatrical about that. It's a documented function of how engagement signals work on this platform. The Roth conversion window is the specific period, roughly 45 to 62, where you can systematically move money from a traditional account to a Roth account at today's tax rates in controlled annual amounts without triggering the tax cascades I just described. You pay the tax now on your terms in a bracket you understand and can manage. From that point forward, the converted money grows tax-free. It comes out in retirement tax-free. There are no RMDs on Roth IRAs, no forced distributions, no collision with Social Security taxation thresholds. Done correctly over 10 years, converting $20,000 to $30,000 per year, carefully staged within your current marginal bracket. This strategy moves a meaningful portion of your retirement savings from taxable to tax-exempt status. The mathematical impact is not trivial. A Roth account with $400,000 is worth significantly more than a traditional IRA with $550,000 to someone who would otherwise be paying 25 or 28% on withdrawals. You're not just preserving money from taxes. You're removing the government's silent co-ownership stake in your retirement portfolio. And here's why the window closes around 62 rather than later. Once you begin taking Social Security, a Roth conversion triggers additional taxable income, which in turn makes more of your Social Security benefit taxable up to 85% of it. The effective marginal rate on that Roth conversion dollar can quietly jump to 38 or 40% once you account for the Social Security torpedo effect. The conversion that cost you 22 cents on the dollar at 55 now costs you 37 cents on the dollar at 64. Not because the published tax brackets changed, but because of interaction effects the published brackets don't show. Every financial advisor should explain this interaction. Most don't. This is where I want to introduce Ray into this story, because Ray is the character that's going to haunt the back half of this video. Ray is 52 years old. He earns $110,000 per year as a senior project manager at a mid-sized manufacturing company in Ohio. He has been maxing his 401k since he was 41, disciplined, consistent, not missing a year. His current balance, $340,000. His financial advisor, whom he pays a 1% annual advisory fee, has told him he's on track. They review his portfolio once a year. The advisor has never once mentioned Roth conversions. Ray has never once asked. Both of them think this is a normal arrangement. Ray is about to discover what on track means when you run the full calculation. Stay with me on this, because Ray's situation is going to get worse before it gets better, and then it's going to get surprisingly okay. But first, I need to walk you through the thing that actually kills most late-stage wealth building plans. And it's not what you think. You think the risk of starting wealth building at 45 is not having enough accumulation time. That's the visible risk, the one you already know about. The non-visible risk, the one that can destroy a well-executed 20-year accumulation plan in about 3 retirement years, is called sequence of returns risk. And it works in a way that is mathematically straightforward but completely counterintuitive until you see the actual numbers. Imagine 2 investors. Both retire at 65 with exactly $1 million. Both average exactly 7% per year over the following 20 years. On paper, identical. But investor 1 hits bad market years. First, down 15% in year 1, down 8% in year 2, then a strong sustained recovery for the remaining 18 years. Investor 2 hits the good years, first a decade of strong gains, then encounters the same 2 bad years near the end of retirement. Same average return, same starting balance, same withdrawal rate. Investor 1 runs out of money somewhere around year 17. Investor 2 dies at 85 with roughly $600,000 still in the account. The mechanism is this. When you're withdrawing from a portfolio and the portfolio drops 30%, you're not losing 30% and then recovering from that. You're losing 30% and simultaneously pulling $50,000 out of a smaller base. That $50,000 is gone from the compounding engine permanently. It doesn't benefit from the recovery. The recovery works on a reduced principal. And because compound growth is multiplicative, not additive, the permanent removal of those early dollars echoes through every subsequent year of the portfolio's life. It's not a setback, it's a structural wound. For someone who started wealth building at 45 and arrives at 65 with $900,000 rather than $2 million, this isn't an academic concern. At $900,000, a 30% drawdown in year 1 produces a portfolio of $630,000 after withdrawal. Your 4% withdrawal rule, $36,000, is now a 5.7% withdrawal rate on the new balance. Morningstar's retirement research and the original Trinity study both indicate that withdrawal rates above 5% on a balanced portfolio carry a historically high probability of portfolio failure within 25 years. If you're 65, 25 years gets you to 90. Most people reading this will live that long. The behavioral trap that multiplies this risk is the one I mentioned earlier. The late starter instinct to hold more equities to compensate for lost accumulation time. This instinct is understandable, and it is exactly wrong. The person who holds 85% equities into their late 50s is not catching up. They're building a sequence risk time bomb that detonates at the worst possible moment right at the transition out of the income earning years, when they have the least capacity to absorb a major loss. Here's what a properly structured 45-year-old accumulation to retirement glide path actually looks like. At 45, roughly 75 to 80% equities balanced across large cap, domestic, international, and a small allocation to real assets. At 55, step down to 65 to 70% equities, increasing the fixed income allocation, not bonds indiscriminately, but short to intermediate duration treasuries and high quality corporate bonds. By 62, closer to 60% equities with a 2-year cash buffer being deliberately built in a separate account outside the investment portfolio. This is not conservative. This is sequenced correctly. The equity percentage is still substantial enough to generate real growth. The structure prevents sequence risk from turning a market correction into a retirement emergency. The cash buffer, specifically what financial planner Harold Evensky documented as the cash reserve strategy, later validated and expanded in Vanguard's retirement income research, is probably the single highest value addition to a late starter's retirement plan. 1 to 2 years of expected living expenses in short-term treasuries or a money market account, entirely separate from your investment portfolio, funded in the 5 years before retirement. When the market drops 20% in year 1 of retirement, you withdraw from the buffer instead of from equities. You let equities recover. When equities recover, you replenish the buffer from portfolio gains. This one structural decision, backed by back-tested historical data from Morningstar, extends the survivability of a retirement portfolio by 5 to 7 years in most adverse scenarios. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between running out of money at 82 and making it to 89. Now, I want to address a thing that financial Twitter has been confidently wrong about for years. Someone on the internet once told me, with complete sincerity, that the solution to all late-stage retirement planning anxiety is a leveraged Bitcoin position held through a self-directed IRA. He was 34. He had discovered Bitcoin in 2020 and experienced the 2020 to 2021 bull run. He had a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet showed that if Bitcoin averaged 40% annual returns for the next 20 years, he would have somewhere around $8 billion at retirement. The spreadsheet was technically accurate given its assumptions. The assumptions were disconnected from every known statistical property of asset returns in human financial history. He showed me this spreadsheet very confidently. I looked at it for a long time. Then I asked him what his plan was for the year. The portfolio dropped 80%. He said, Bitcoin doesn't go down 80%. I did not know how to respond to this person in a way that would be useful to them. Now, let me deliver the reversal I promised you earlier. The standard advice on Social Security timing, repeated by almost every financial advisor, every personal finance publication, and every retired uncle at every Thanksgiving dinner in America, is to delay claiming Social Security to age 70. The reasoning is mathematically coherent. If your full retirement age is 67, delaying to 70 earns you roughly 8% more annual benefit for each year of delay. 3 years of delay means roughly 24% more per month for the rest of your life. On a baseline benefit of $2,200 per month at 67, claiming at 70 gets you approximately $2,728. That's $628 more per month, about $7,500 per year for life. This sounds unambiguously correct. And in one specific narrow scenario, you live past 82 or 83, it is mathematically the superior choice. But the Social Security Administration's own actuarial tables tell a different story. A male who reaches age 62 has roughly a 54% probability of living to age 80, which means roughly 46% of men who delay claiming to 70 will never break even on that decision in terms of total lifetime benefits received. The break-even age for claiming at 70 versus 67 is approximately 82 to 83. If you die at 79, claiming at 67 was better. Most people making this decision don't frame it this way because thinking about your own death date as an investment variable is uncomfortable. But that discomfort is not a financial strategy. And here's the layer the advice almost never includes. If you have a meaningful Roth account, which you should, if you've executed the conversion ladder I described and you're delaying Social Security from 67 to 70, you need to fund those 3 years of living expenses from somewhere. If you're drawing from the Roth to bridge the gap, you're interrupting tax-free compounding during what should be a critical late accumulation phase. If you're drawing from a taxable brokerage account, you're generating capital gains in those years. If you're drawing from a traditional IRA, you're creating ordinary income that could itself trigger the Social Security taxation torpedo when you do eventually claim. The 3-year delay to 70 may actually cost you net present value when you factor in what you're sacrificing from the account you're drawing to fund the delay. This is not true in every case. It depends on your Roth balance, your health, your other income sources, your spouse's benefit structure, and the specific tax implications of your bridge funding source. Which means always delay to 70 is not a financial strategy. It's a liability shield for advisors who don't want to spend 4 hours building an actual integrated analysis. The Social Security timing decision is a 6-variable optimization problem, and it deserves 6-variable treatment. Anyone who gives you a 1-sentence answer to it is not doing the math. Now, let me close Ray's story with the actual numbers, because I promised you a case study and abstract concepts only do so much work. Ray is 52, $340,000 in a traditional 401k, annual salary of $110,000, projected retirement expenses of $60,000 in today's dollars, adjusted for inflation to roughly $83,000 by age 67 using a 2.5% average inflation assumption. Using the 4% rule against that inflation-adjusted number, he needs approximately $2,075,000 at retirement. His target date, age 67, 15 years away. At 7% annual return, his existing $340,000 grows to approximately $938,000 in 15 years without any additional contributions. He needs another $1,137,000 from new savings over those 15 years. At 7%, accumulating that amount in 15 years requires contributing roughly $3,600 per month. Ray earns $110,000. After federal and state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, his take-home is approximately $72,000 per year, or $6,000 per month. Saving $3,600 per month is 60% of his take-home. That is not realistic as stated. This is where the framework actually matters. Ray's available tax advantage space in 2025, 401k with catch-up contribution, is $30,500 annually. Roth IRA with catch-up is $8,000. Health savings account at 55 with catch-up will be $5,350. Total, $43,850 per year in tax advantage space, approximately $3,600 per month, almost perfectly matching the target. But here's the key. Because these are pre-tax contributions, they reduce his taxable income significantly. His 401k contribution of $30,500 reduces his federal taxable income by $30,500, saving him roughly $6,700 in federal income tax annually. His effective out-of-pocket costs for the 401k contribution is not $30,500. It's closer to $23,800. Stack the three-level savings architecture correctly. Max the 401k first for the tax deduction, fund the HSA second, because it's the only triple tax advantage account that exists. Pre-tax contributions, tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals for qualified medical expenses, then the Roth IRA third. The HSA, by the way, can function as a stealth retirement account after 65. At 65, HSA withdrawals for non-medical expenses are simply taxed as ordinary income, exactly like a traditional IRA. Before 65, they're tax-free for medical use. After 65, every dollar Ray spent on medical expenses that he paid out of pocket rather than drawing from the HSA can be reimbursed tax-free at any future date, as long as he kept the receipts. There is no deadline on HSA reimbursement. Ray can pay for knee surgery at 58 from his checking account. Save the receipt, let the HSA compound tax-free for 9 years, and then reimburse himself tax-free at 67. This is a legitimate IRS-approved strategy that approximately nobody uses. Starting at age 55, 3 years from now, Ray also begins Roth conversions of $22,000 per year from his traditional 401k, staying within his 22% bracket. Over 10 years, from 55 to 65, he converts $220,000 from pre-tax to Roth. He pays approximately $48,400 in total conversion taxes over that decade, roughly $4,800 per year in additional tax cost. But those $220,000 growing tax-free in the Roth from age 55 to 67 become approximately $360,000. In retirement, Ray draws from the Roth first for living expenses, keeping his total taxable income low enough that only 50% of his Social Security benefit gets taxed rather than 85%. That one structural decision saves him an estimated $50,000 to $70,000 in total lifetime taxes, paid for with $48,000 in conversion taxes he chose to pay on his own schedule. Ray makes 3 mistakes between 52 and 67. He panic adjusts his allocation once during a market correction and misses about 3 months of recovery. He takes a career gap at 58, 6 months between jobs, and misses 2 quarters of contributions. He also delays starting the HSA reimbursement strategy by 2 years because he didn't fully believe it was legal until his CPA confirmed it in writing. Those 3 mistakes cost him roughly $90,000 in future portfolio value. His retirement portfolio at 67 still comes in at $1.6 million. He claims Social Security at 68 after doing the break-even math with his specific health history and Roth balance. He retires with $31,200 in annual Roth distributions, tax-free, and $2,200 per month in Social Security, of which only 50% is taxable. His total tax bill in year 1 of retirement is lower than his total tax bill in his last year of work. Ray is not a success story in the inspirational sense. He doesn't retire to a beach or start a company. He retires to a house he owns with enough money that he never has to think about running out. With a Roth buffer, that means a market crash in the first 3 retirement years won't force him to sell a single share. That's the actual goal, not heroics. Adequacy achieved through understanding. Here are the 3 things you should do if you're in this window right now. The first, run the Roth conversion calculation this year, not next year, this year. Calculate your current marginal tax bracket after 401k contributions and the standard deduction. Identify how many dollars you can convert from traditional to Roth without crossing into the next bracket. Then, have your CPA model what your required minimum distributions look like at 73 under current trajectory versus after 10 years of systematic conversion. The difference in projected lifetime taxes will likely be the most expensive number you've seen on a spreadsheet that you had the power to change. The second, fund the sequence buffer before retirement, not during. Starting 5 years before your target retirement date, build a separate account, a money market fund, short-term treasuries, anything that doesn't correlate with equities representing 18 to 24 months of projected living expenses. This is not your emergency fund. Label it separately. Never touch it until you're retired and the market is down more than 15%. This one structure, funded incrementally over 5 years, eliminates the scenario where a market correction in retirement year 1 forces a permanent portfolio degrading withdrawal from a depressed equity account. The third, stack the catch-up contribution architecture aggressively and immediately. At 50, you gain an extra $7,500 in 401k capacity. At 55, an extra $1,000 in HSA capacity. At any age, an extra $1,000 in Roth IRA capacity. Most people eligible for these catch-ups do not use them fully, not because they can't afford to, but because nobody told them these doors were open. The combined additional capacity at 55 is $9,500 per year in extra tax advantage space. At 7% over 12 years, $9,500 annually compounds to approximately $168,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a year of retirement income that you're leaving on the table every year you don't use it. The launch window doesn't extend because you feel ready. Pioneer 10 launched on March 2nd, 1972, not because the engineers were inspired, but because the planetary geometry was what it was and wouldn't repeat for years. Your 40s are a geometry problem. The alignment between earning capacity, contribution limits, compounding horizon, and the Roth conversion window exists for a specific period. It's still open, but it closes mechanically, not emotionally, and it does not negotiate. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the last thing I'll say is this. The people who fail the 45 window aren't failing because they lack discipline or intelligence. They're failing because the map they were handed was drawn by people with a structural financial incentive to keep it incomplete. Reading the boring documents, the IRS publications, the actuarial tables, the actual mechanics of how tax-advantaged accounts interact is not glamorous. It's also not complicated once you decide to look. The information is public. The tools are available. The window is still open. Stop standing on the launch